13,000 years ago, something happened on Earth. Opinions vary as to what it was, and evidence is inconclusive. Some say it was a meteorite or a comet impacting the northern hemisphere. Some say it was abrupt climate change, and some say the poles flipped, or there was a magnetic excursion, or a cosmic electrical event occurred that simulated the effect of one of these other events. In place of knowing the nature of the event, we at least know what happened next. Large mammals all over Earth went extinct in the megafauna extinction. The polar ice caps melted and sea levels rose 200 or 300 feet. The climate warmed, forests became deserts, tundra became forest. Vast areas of coastal land were inundated with floods, and human populations were decimated, suffering another in a long series of genetic bottlenecks, whereby the breeding population is reduced. Until now, official history placed all the important developments of humanity after this event. The birth of civilization, it was claimed, came after the flood. Agriculture, metallurgy, pottery, city-states. From what human development and history, we can be sure that civilization was well underway before the flood. Humans have not been advancing in our 10,000 years of civilization. They have been recovering. We are the post-diluvial survivors of a human population explosion that covered the globe. The evidence in this program is not speculation. It's hard science founded on material discoveries that have overturned and revolutionized the previous view of history. It is the new history of humanity, and it is now the accepted view of archaeologists, geneticists, botanists, and historians the world over that for at least the last 50 to 70,000 years, humanity flourished all over Earth, inhabited every continent, was possessed of the material and cultural trappings of what we call civilization. With this startling new point of view, it's time to look again at our past. The world's oldest example of abstract art dates back more than 70,000 years. It was found in a cave in South Africa. Scientists say the discovery shows that modern ways of thinking developed far earlier than we think. Dr. Christopher Henshelwood from the State University of New York at Stony Brook says, "They may have been constructed with symbolic intent, the meaning of which is now unknown. The engraving itself on this artifact is quite a complex geometric pattern. There is a system to the pattern. We don't know what it means, but there are symbols that I think could have been interpreted by those people as having meaning that would have been understood by others." The engraved ochre pieces are at least 70,000 years old. The find pushes back by some 35,000 years the earliest time when biologically modern humans were known to have developed art. There is no doubt that the people in southern Africa were behaviorally modern 70,000 years ago. A large set of specialized bone tools found recently in a South African cave is forcing archaeologists to rethink their ideas about when modern human behavior emerged. The issue has been a key question in debate about human origins. This discovery shows conclusively that early Homo sapiens came out of Africa already well developed in crafting tools of bone. Many archaeologists regard the introduction of bone tools as a key indicator of modern behavior. Data analysis reveals the tools are all more than 70,000 years old, considerably earlier than humans were thought to acquire bone technology. Until now, scientists had concluded that early human ancestors became anatomically modern while still in Africa, but lagged behind in terms of behavioral traits until they migrated to Europe and elsewhere. The implications are that there was modern human behavior in Africa 35,000 years before Europe. What has been suggested up until now is that modern human behavior was a late occurrence, that though people were anatomically modern in Africa from 150,000 to 100,000 years ago, they remained behaviorally non-modern until 40 or 50,000 years ago, when they suddenly changed and moved into Europe and elsewhere. This is not the case, and radically overturns previous assumptions about human behavior and development. Newly analysed remains suggest a modern human killed a Neanderthal man in what is now Iraq between 50,000 and 75,000 years ago. The finding is scant but tantalising evidence for a theory that modern humans helped to kill off the Neanderthals. The probable weapon of choice, a thrown spear. The evidence, a lethal wound on the remains of a Neanderthal skeleton. The victim, a 40 to 50-year-old male, now called Shanidar III. Shanidar has signs of arthritis and a sharp, deep slice in his left ninth rib. It's thought the best explanation for this injury is a projectile weapon, and given who had those and who didn't, it implies at least one act of interspecies aggression. Perhaps the most overlooked of human behaviors in reference to our evolution is aggression. Humans are predators, but when did humans begin perpetrating acts of aggression on each other? It's impossible to know exactly how major a role aggression played in Neanderthals' disappearance. Groups undoubtedly competed for resources, and evidently humans sometimes attacked and even ate Neanderthals. The death of Shanidar III may thus have foreshadowed the fate of his entire species. The oldest known samples of pottery have been unearthed in southern China. US archaeologists involved have determined that fragments from a large bowl found in Zhangredong Cave, Jiangxi Province, are 20,000 years old. The discovery, published in the journal Science, is the latest in recent years that have pushed back the invention of pottery by 10,000 years. Until recently, the majority view was that pottery bowls and drink receptacles were invented after the emergence of agriculture, when people began to stay in one place for long periods. But in the last 10 years, researchers have found instances of pottery predating agriculture. One possible reason for the invention of pottery is that 20,000 years ago, Earth was cooler than it had been for 1,000,000 years. According to lead researcher Professor Ofer Bar-Yosef of Harvard University, pottery cauldrons would have enabled people to extract more nutrition from their food by cooking it. Until recently, researchers say the story of the origin of agriculture was one of a relatively sudden appearance of plant cultivation in the Near East around 10,000 years ago, spreading quickly into Europe and dovetailing conveniently with ideas about how quickly language and population genes spread from the Near East to Europe. Initially, genetics appeared to support this idea, but now cracks are beginning to appear in the evidence underpinning that model. A team led by Dr. Robin Allaby from the University of Warwick have developed a new mathematical model that shows how plant agriculture actually began much earlier than first thought, well before the Younger Dryas Big Freeze. Up until now, researchers believed in a rapid establishment of agriculture, which came about as artificial selection was able to dominate natural plant selection, and crucially, as a consequence, they thought most crops came from a single location and single domestication event. Recent archaeological evidence has already begun to undermine this idea, pushing back the date of the first appearance of agriculture. The best example of this being the archaeological site Ohallo II in Syria, where more than 90,000 plant fragments from 23,000 years ago show that wild cereals were gathered over 10,000 years earlier than previously thought, and before the last glacial maximum 18,000 years ago. The last glacial cold period on Earth began 68,000 years ago, shortly after the Toba eruption event. At that time, the human population suffered a bottleneck, reducing breeding individuals to some 10,000. From this moment in time, humans recovered from the Toba event and spread out of Africa to all the continents of Earth. Our tools became more and more sophisticated. We became artists and navigators. We sailed the 7 seas. Our language developed. We fought other human species for resources. We began cultivating plants. We created settled areas and traded with other regions. Humans did all of this many years earlier than previously thought, and more. The evidence for our earlier and faster development and exodus from Africa is not circumstantial or theoretical. It is based upon science, well-documented archaeology, and genetics. Humans underwent a great leap forward that only now are we beginning to acknowledge or understand. There are gaps in our knowledge, and it might be tempting to fill them with speculation about great civilizations and lost technologies, but the facts themselves are astounding. The facts speak of humans who studied the stars to navigate the seas, utilized maths in problem solving, understood botany. Humans who could craft any material available to them into precision tools and weapons. Marvelous works of art or ocean-going vessels. Humans who made music, painted pictures, mourned their dead, valued life, and celebrated fertility. You would recognize them, and they would recognize you, because we are identical. Discovered in 2001, submerged under the waters of the Bay of Cambay in India, is a 9,500-year-old city. The city is approximately 120 feet beneath the water near Gujarat on the northwest coast of India. 5 miles long by 2 miles wide, it is huge by the standards of ancient cities. Its age was derived from carbon dating of artifacts brought up from the site, including pieces of wood and human bone. Sonar evidence of the rectilinear outline of stone blocks used in its construction indicates that they are larger than any other man-made stone blocks known to archaeology. The Bay of Cambay's underwater city has been largely ignored by the West, perhaps because it would mean the overthrow of the mainstream Western view that the Fertile Crescent area, including the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, was the birthplace of civilization. Yet, even the oldest cities in the Fertile Crescent are perhaps 8,000 years old, while most are 5,000 years or less. The discovery in Cambay astounded scientists because it predates all other finds in the area, suggesting a much longer history of civilization than was first assumed. It is believed the area was submerged when the ice caps melted in the last ice age. Who built this city? Who lived there? And how did they live? Are we to believe that a group of humans who had not yet developed agriculture or invented pottery suddenly created a vast city with no prior development or settlements or evolution of social structures, that its citizens were hunter-gatherers, and that the millions who lived there were landlocked hunters? The people who built this sunken city were advanced architects of stone buildings. Its inhabitants could only be supported by trade and agriculture. The need for such a place could only come about from a long period of growing population and social order, built upon skills acquired thousands or tens of thousands of years before. The Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid has long fascinated archaeologists and historians. The orthodox story of its purpose, construction, and age are almost certainly incorrect. For 4,000 years, it was the tallest building on Earth. It's claimed that as if by magic, humanity one day built the greatest stone monument on the planet out of the blue, with no provenance, no development, no antecedent civilization or culture. It is, we are asked to believe, it grew out of the sand, perfectly aligned with the cosmos, a mathematical fraction of the Earth's volume, precisely constructed from some of the hardest rocks on Earth, containing internal chambers and passageways impractical for burial, useless for ceremony, containing no artifacts, inscriptions, or evidence of its use as a tomb whatsoever at all. Every pyramid built after the Great Pyramid is a pale imitation. In fact, pyramid construction as documented in the known Egyptian civilization is, by comparison, a shoddy knockoff, used by pharaohs as a status symbol. Only the Great Pyramid stands out as being of ancient, and even to this day, unknown origin. There are more ancient sites like the Great Pyramid all over the Earth. In Japan, Scotland, England, South America, the Middle East and Turkey. But the Great Pyramid and the Cambay Bay site should be enough to convince the most ardent rationalist of the proof of ancient civilization. That humanity bore the fruit of civilization before us is no longer mythology. That we have risen up and been swept away repeatedly is not conjecture. Our history has been revolutionized by new discoveries. Our view of the past becomes clearer the longer and deeper we dig. Yet one truth, and one sobering fact looms above all else in the new history of humanity. Civilization is a brief and delicate flower that blooms in short, forgiving periods of stability. We should celebrate our current circumstances and take steps to prepare for an uncertain future, because, as the past reveals in stark, unforgiving terms, nothing lasts forever.